said 11 o'clock.
All right. Okay.
So I think we should get going. So Mina, I don't know if you want to share your picture or your video or not, and then go away, whatever it may be, or turn it back off again if bandwidth is an issue.
Yeah,
but,
sure. I will very quickly wave hello to you guys. Not that I don't want you to see my wonderful face, but rather the internet seems to go a little bit wobbly. Very close.
I think you proved that.
Yep.
So yeah, you cut out just at that moment. So yeah, nice of you to say hello. Why don't we bring up the screen share again, because that's probably quite important. And then we just get going. So it is now 1 minute past, and I wanted to say a few words just before you hear from our subject matter expert today. So first of all, for those of you who look on the right-hand side, you'll see the RMS logo. On the first slide, or on the bottom of the one that Mina is currently presenting, you'll notice it's now Blueprint X. So we've rebranded just recently, rather excitingly, about 1.5 years ago, almost 2 years now. We were acquired here locally by a British company called Blueprint X, and we are now fully owned subsidiary of them. So it's all very exciting. You'll have seen that we had plans to rebrand at this time, and what with various viruses going around the world, we did consider maybe that wouldn't be a good idea, but we thought, what the heck, in for a penny, in for a pound, now's the time to do all these things. So we're off and running. So welcome to the latest in the Marketo Unlocked series. It's great, we've got so many registrants. I've got a list of them all up here. Those will be joining us on video too. Hopefully when people watch this in times to come, they'll say, what virus? What was he talking about? I don't know what it was. You won't hear very much from me. I'm Graham. I'm on the left-hand side. I'm basically your MC today, and I'll be taking all your questions. I can see folks are starting to type them all as they come in, which is kind of nice. And the main talent here today is Mina. So next slide for me, Mina. Here is our subject matter expert. So been with the Blueprint X ANZ /RMS crew for almost 2 years now. Came to us straight out of News Corp, and a very experienced Marketo user at that. I won't bother reading all the things up there, but his real key attributes, as well as being able to deliver these sort of sessions, would be his training courses and implementing or executing those public and private training courses. And he happens to be one of our resident MCSAs. So that's, as most people would know, it's the highest accolade and accreditation that that Marketo has. We've got several of those, and Mina's the most recent to achieve that certification. So well done. This slide here, I always present at the beginning of our Marketo Unlocked series, and it's really just to give a really good picture of everything that is digital marketing these days. It's not ours, it came from Gartner. It's a really good image without having all those other ones of logos, you know, all over the place. But it kind of indicates just how difficult or involved, let's put it that way, the digital marketing world has actually become. And funny enough, we're not actually really going to zoom in on any of those key things today. What we're really talking about is the art of the debrief. So it kind of encompasses a whole heap of these things. But zooming in and going to the next level, or the next slide for me, Mina. What I wanted to do is to share with you the audience that we're talking to today. My slide isn't perfect here, my bar chart isn't perfect, but you can see how many people have got, and we asked the question as people were registering, what's your experience with Marketo? So there's a number of people who are less than 1 year, which is the right-hand side, and then going back to the left, most people are between 1 and 4 years, and there's a smattering, let's put it that way, of folks who are 5 years and above. So that'll give you a gauge, Mina, for the sort of questions that I suspect we're going to get.
Understood.
So there's the intro. The next slide is for me basically to say what led us to this topic. So this topic I know is very close to Mina's heart. I'd written it down here that he's probably executed more campaigns in the last 2 years and I'll rattle some of these things off with Uber, with Rico, with Gingerbread Folk. Hi, Karen. Saw you on the note earlier on. And others. Then I've had hot dinners, literally. There's just so many campaigns and things that Mina has either been responsible for executing. So literally hundreds, if not more, of those campaigns over that time. So I couldn't think of anybody better to deliver the presentation than you, Mina. So at that point, I will hand over. Do keep your questions coming, folks, as they come in. But for now, I'll hand over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Graham. Graham, may I ask you a small favor? Could I ask you to bring up the presentation?
Sure.
Because being on one screen makes the notes a little bit difficult to read on my side.
Okay. So once I've got it up, what would you like me to do?
Then I will stop sharing and then we'll get you to share.
Sure. Okay.
Thank you.
I'm going to share. And that would be that screen there. Share that.
Wonderful.
Excuse my messy second screen.
That's okay. Great.
And we got to there,
yeah.
I think.
Thank you very much.
It's quite all right.
Yeah. Normally would have two screens, but I guess in the current environment,
go for it.
We're making do. So the art of debriefing. First off, thank you very much for taking time out of your busy days. I know many of you are working from home, but that doesn't make it less busy. It just makes it different busy. Today's session is about the art of debriefing, and I would probably call it closing the loop on campaigns. Many of you who are in that 1 to 4 year timeline of experience when it comes to Marketo or any form of marketing automation will have executed a fair number of campaigns using a variety of channels. And you may also be asking yourselves, well, was it successful? How do I measure success? What do I do in the future dealing with my team members, different business units? No matter how small or large you are, there are business units within a broader business. There is a sales team, there is a marketing team, and they have competing priorities. So what today's presentation aims to do is talk about closing loop on campaigns and what that means from a business perspective. If we can move on, we're going to sing from the same hymn sheet. And what that means is that a great debrief discussion starts with describing specific business objectives at the beginning of the campaign. It's simply getting everyone to sing from the same hymn sheet with action items for business improvement. Whereas a scheduled report or results sheet may provide data at the end of a campaign, it won't generate a shared understanding as to where the successes or development areas were for the marketing and sales team. And whoever is debriefing with the team, this could be the MarTech team member, it could be a marketing coordinator, it could be the business owner themselves, it could be a marketing manager, at times it could even be a sales manager or an ops manager. There are a few key pillars required in a debrief. The intention. First off, what were the goals of that campaign? And if the campaign involved multiple business units, were all the goals catered for? Could they all be catered for? In terms of Marketo, were the program statuses in line with the goals? So if you were sending out an email, were the program statuses that you used for the program relevant to an email? When it comes to a channel, were the channels used correctly? How was the campaign going to be put out to market? Was it multi-touch? Was it single touch? Was there a CRM? And by that I mean Salesforce or Dynamics, or if you've got a unique or a bespoke CRM. Was there a CRM component? Was there a sales team involved? So what we're trying to do here is find all of the aspects that encompass that campaign. Let's take stock of how that campaign ran. Were the goals measurable and trackable? And if they are trackable, where were they tracked? For marketing, this might be a benchmark like an open click rate, it may be a form fill, and you could use things like link performance report, email performance reports, or program performance reports. But for sales, it could be more something like lead conversion, opportunity creation and closure. Did we measure actual sales numbers using CRM-based reporting, such as opportunities or build sales? And most vitally, was this information stored somewhere centrally? This is probably the part that a lot of businesses get to, and it seems to fall away. Sales works out of Salesforce or Dynamics as an example, and they've got their billings and it's amazing and they can see how much money they've brought into the business. Marketing has Marketo or any other form of MarTech platform, and they can see how many clicks or how many opens or form fills occurred, but there's no marriage between the data in terms of, can we attribute that that marketing effort caused those sales? Did it influence those sales? And this is what a debrief intends to do. It intends to not only uncover the successes, but it also tries to show up the development areas in terms of how to better a campaign. So let's look at intentions first. When it comes to intentions and outcomes, was the idea behind the campaign known to begin with? Or did it start off as something on the left and it morphed into something onto the right? Was there a reason? What was the reason behind the campaign? Was the business batch blasting a group of contacts to fill a short-term gap in revenue? Then we have to ask ourselves, not only that, but was that gap filled? If not, why not? And if it was, is it recorded against the CRM? Was the business sending leads down an engagement funnel to encourage conversion? And if that was the case, was conversion achieved? What was the measure of success for that conversion? Was it simply knowing the person's name or having more information about them? Or did they pick up a trial product? All of these questions need to be asked and answered early on in the campaign so that when the campaign runs, you can see where the success is going or whether you need to pivot and change direction. But if we do this at the end of a campaign, well, it's already done. Sure, you can take learnings into the next one, but it's a missed opportunity for improving ROI at the beginning of a campaign. If the business was doing something like retention, where we're trying to hold ground as well as increase total lifetime value of customer, was retention achieved? This probably would require financial reporting from something like Salesforce or Dynamics or some other, it could be like a data warehouse where monetary value is stored. Did the audience churn? Was the audience retained with no change to spend? Did they retain with less spend? Were they retained with increased spend? All of these questions filter back to how successful a campaign was. It's not only good enough to say, yep, we had a 99% open rate and we had a 60% click-through rate. These are all amazing marketing metrics. But from a sales perspective, if none of those eventuated into money, new money coming into the business, then the ROI is quite low. And that's where often a lot of friction occurs between sales and marketing. Marketing says, we did our job, and sales says, that's great, but we have no extra, we don't have any better leads here, the quality is not improving. It means that there's no common intention and outcome between the two teams. Once we've understood the intention and the prospective outcomes, we come to channels, because we only have a few ways of talking to a customer. I won't go into too many stats about each channel, but I did want to focus on the one that we all use quite heavily, and that's email. Email, what can we say here? Well loved, well hated, the cheapest among the group, and probably the bread and butter of even the most basic MarTech platforms. If you go as something as simple and as effective for some businesses as MailChimp, all the way up to enterprise level, such as Marketo, at the end of the day, these are all going to be pumping out emails. But here's a few bits of information for you. 93% of B2B marketers use email marketing to proliferate content. That means that it's a very, very big market. You are competing against almost every other B2B marketer in terms of getting the attention of your audience. 73% of millennials use email for business. That's still a fair chunk, but if we compare that to maybe 20 or even 10 years ago, there'd be a reduction there, because millennials are not only email savvy, but they've also got heavy usage of app. And when we look at the slide, you can see that push notifications and in-app has a very high penetration, probably higher than email, but its problem is that it's dependent on the app being present on the device and any custom settings by the individual user. So if I've muted that app, or if I aggregate the notifications of your app, I'll get them, but I'll probably get them at a time that suits me. Whereas something like email or SMS is going to hit my device at the time most likely that you intend for me to receive it versus aggregated. That's a good tidbit for when you're dealing with a millennial audience, in that, yes, you know that they're not only email based, but there are caveats around using other channels. And the last tidbit of information about emails is that 124.5 billion business emails are sent each day. These stats aren't here to scare you, but they are intended to give you two things: to challenge the marketing team to consider how compelling the customer journey is once an email is sent. It's not good enough anymore to be sending out an email and waiting for the leads to roll in. And the same stats should inform sales on aligning with marketing with regards to reducing customer friction points. It's not good enough anymore to be sending an email and for that email to result in a call to action where the customer ends up on a list to be called back, only to be spoken to as if they have no idea about what the product is. That causes a lot of friction between sales and customer, and could cause a lot of drop off in opportunities won. So that gives you a bit of information about the channels. I will briefly go through those ones where it says email has a medium penetration, pretty heavily used, and can also be easily abused. Remember, there are spam traps all through the internet that have been set up by email client servers to stop businesses from blasting. That means something like, if Acme Industries sends out 50,000 emails today, you're almost guaranteed that you'll be picked up by a spam trap email address, and you will be you'll be earmarked black by email client servers. So, and you'll find it hard to unlock yourself. You'll have to speak to Marketo about unlocking your domain. Push notifications, we've discussed. High penetration, but dependent on app download. Telemarketing has a medium penetration. It's probably not as easy anymore to be doing traditional telemarketing because of do not call registers and because of customers having reduced reliance on their phones, especially landlines. You're now probably dealing more with mobiles, but that does give you a chance to look at using SMS, which has a higher penetration rate, but it does come with an expense as well as a fairly reduced reporting capability. At the end of the day, SMS is an analog technology, so you can see how many SMSs you've sent, and you will probably be able to see how many delivered, but it's not likely that you're going to know how many were opened. However, you can infer how many were clicked if you use something like a UTM URL inside the SMS. With direct mail, medium to low penetration, it's super traditional. It still has its place, but it is expensive because you are obviously printing and then sending, and then you don't know whether the person you've addressed it to is still even at that business, or even if they are at that business, whether there are gatekeepers who end up holding that mail for a few days, which makes it redundant. It does resonate as a physical representation of the brand though, and it does give gravitas to your brand when you do send out a piece of direct mail. So once we've debriefed and understood the intentions, and we've looked at the channels that were used by that campaign, we come through to the success measures. This is an interesting one because it's not going to fit everyone at the same time. However, there needs to be a shared glossary between sales and marketing as to what success means. The measure of success for a campaign, for example, that was meant to lead generate, is probably going to be the number of leads generated by that campaign from a marketing perspective, and how many of those converted into legitimate market qualified leads from a sales perspective. if the number is huge from a marketing perspective and then very low from a sales perspective, marketing is grinning because they've done their job, but sales is not so happy because the measure of success didn't really give them the number of conversions that they were aiming to get. And it took them away from doing other things. So while they're dedicating their resources to following up these leads, they're not following up others, because at the end of the day, there are a set number of hours in the working day. And if sales is dedicating their time to following up leads that end up being good from a marketing perspective, but are not close to purchasing, it does waste their time. And we need to be cognizant of that when we're marketing. It's all well and good to produce thousands of leads, but if they're not qualified yet, we probably should not show them to sales yet. How was success measured and tracked? And where was it socialized? Was it in Salesforce as a marketing campaign report? Was it in Dynamics as a list? Was it in Marketo in terms of a program performance report, which I'll show in the next slide? How will we know if it's worth doing this campaign again in the future if we don't have tracked and measured results from the last few times we've done it? And there's no way to compare that if we're not comparing apples with apples. If we're comparing a lead gen campaign with a retention campaign, those aren't the same intentions. They may carry the same channel, but they're definitely not the same intention. So we can't put hand on heart and say that we were successful in both and measure both the same way. Is the measure of success achievable at a stretch? Sometimes I see my stakeholders when I'm working in a business like Graham mentioned earlier, where I've been asked to do execution, where the stakeholders' intention is fine, there's no problems there, and the channel is fine, but what they're expecting to be the result, or how large or how small the result, whatever it may be, is a little bit otherworldly. It doesn't make much sense. It's a little bit of a finger in the air. And it's fine if that's the first time they've done it, because they may not have an intended measure of success that makes sense yet. But if it's the third and fourth and fifth time that you've run a campaign that has the same look and feel, and it's got the same outcomes associated with it, if the measure of success is a little bit otherworldly or astronomical, then it's probably time to sit down and have a come to Jesus talk with your stakeholder, because we need to understand why they have that expectation. Otherwise, we're going to constantly fall short in inverted commas, even though the market you're sending to, or the market you're engaging, is never going to give you those results. That happens a lot with some businesses, especially if they've taken the same channel over and over and essentially beaten a dead horse with the same channel. So like sending to C-suites an email that says, hey, check out our product. Well, C-suites are very barely going to open emails that are marketing related. And in most cases, C-suites are not the decision maker when it comes to purchases from the first door. They may be the sign-off person, but they're not procurement. So they're not going to sit there and look at the spec sheet and go, oh yeah, that product suits my business. There was one I wanted to share with you, which is the program performance report. This actually belongs to one of our customers who is online today. I won't name and shame her. However, I wanted to show you what a program performance report looks like. As you can see, this measures success, and success could be new leads. It could be the conversion of leads to contacts. It could be the engagement level of contacts. If it's an event or a webinar like this one, it could be the attendance. And through all of those, it could still be opportunity generation. This could be like a BNI meeting where we're meeting customers or prospective customers, where we're trying to create opportunities to engage with them. In all cases, opportunity creation in a campaign is measurable. So a program performance report like the one you're seeing today in Marketo is an excellent way to quickly see how effective marketing programs were. But this type of report requires three main things to be added into it. It needs a shared measure of success. So as you can see, all the channels there are the same. So the area that's purpled out is actually the program names. but they all share the same type of channel. By sharing the same channel, they all share the same program customer journey, meaning that the measures of success are identical across all of these types of different programs. Some of them were Facebook related, some of them were on the door events, so people came up to the customer's door. Some of them were email batch blasts to current customers with an ability to forward on to friends. So while they had different intentions and different outcomes, they were all lead gen. And because they're all lead gen, we are comparing apples with apples. The measure of success with this one is twofold. It was new people, number of new people brought into the business, and how many of those new people ended up going to the website to buy a product. So in the first column, the total members, it's a bit cut off, but for the first one, it says 1603. That was the total number of people that program touched. Of those 1603, 1568 were new people. And of those 1568, 1521 were successful in the second regard. The second regard for this customer specifically was to go to the website to buy a product. The customer spent $2,500 on this campaign, and automatically Marketo is able to calculate that the cost per member was $1.56, the cost per new name was $1.59, and the cost per success was $1.64. When we compare that very quickly with the second line, while the second line had total members 27 and had far more closer total new names to the members, you'll see that because the cost of it at $16.50 and the number of successes at only 15 meant that this customer had spent $110 just to bring a contact across the line to purchase. I doubt our customer, when they see this report, will ever do that second type of campaign again. So this type of report requires three things: the measure of success, a program cost, and the program cost can be added into your programs within the setup tab. The spend cost of the program is put here, and you need to have a common apples to apples, a common correct journey between channels and tags. Now that we've looked at that, we change gears a little bit and we leave intentions and we leave our success markers and we leave the channels and we look at, cool, we know how we're going to be talking to our customer. We know what the measure of success is and we know what we're trying to say, but how do we come up with that audience? And the results of this debrief session should provide action items that fall into one of these broad areas, meaning that your cohort, if it's too small or too large, will have had a result on how successful your campaign was. The content, if it was not relevant or if it was too niche, will have a result on how successful your campaign is. And was your timing or cadence right? With cohorts, they should always be built using hard data points. What I mean by that is fields that are found in your Salesforce instance or Dynamics or your bespoke CRM. They can be using behavioral data points, such as in Marketo, like clicked a link in the last few emails or has visited your website in the last 90 days. Ideally, a blend is the best as it washes out any people who may be ready to engage with the content. Who may not be ready to engage with the content. When it comes to content, dynamic content comes into play here. So while a cohort might be isolated, you may be talking to a group of 500 people who have all purchased from you in the past. Think about any variations of the content to engage the cohort at a deeper level. Do some of them have preferences? Do some of them have job titles that make the content more engaging if you talk at their level versus a more generic level? It could be the size of the company. So if they are in a small to medium business, do you talk at a more local and a more a localized level where the customer's engagement is based on this smaller, tight-knit community versus an enterprise customer where you need to show the robustness of your product. And then cadence, respecting the channel and the contact's sanity when it comes to being communicated with. So if you're emailing a customer, that's great. Don't email them every day. And if you are emailing them and SMSing them, probably not a good idea to add to that something like in-app and a telemarketing call in the same week, because you're going to drive them crazy and you're very likely going to cause an unsubscribe. And if the campaign was designed with multiple assets and multiple touch points or multiple channels, think about the timing associated with execution. Is it sensible? Should you start with an email and progress to a telemarketing or an SMS if you don't get a response? So these questions, cohort, content, and cadence, they should channel for you, or they should direct you to looking at where the development area might be to make that sort of campaign more successful in the future. Was it the wrong or the right type of person? Was the content okay for them? And was the timing all right as well? Key takeouts. So in our next slide, with this debrief discussion, so intentions, measures of success, and your channels, and along with the 3 C's, content, cohort, and cadence, this requires some simmering down. And there is probably no matrix to this because every business is different, but you need to give yourself an arbitrary score out of 5, where the outcome of the campaign matched the intention. If you fall less than 3, which is 60% effectively, then 1 or more areas need to be revised. It could be as simple as the cohort was too small, which hampered success. Therefore, we need to look at the cohort better. We need to look at the list building to be different, which means don't clone it next time. Or perhaps the sales team handling the inbound leads were not aware that the customer had already been engaged for quite a while, meaning that when they turned up in the Salesforce campaign or in the Dynamics list, the poor sales rep starts pitching from scratch when the customer is effectively at 90% market qualified. This bores the customer and it frustrates your sales agent as well. And one thing that I will share with you, and I'm sure all of you have heard in the past, is GIGO or SISO, if you're a little bit more French. It's garbage in, garbage out. Or if you want to put it more nicely, if nothing changes, nothing changes. And if you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to keep getting what you're getting. And if you want change, make some. And I will stop boring you with my non-radio voice now and look for some questions.
You have a very radio voice. As somebody once said to me, Graham, you have a face for radio.
I probably do have a face for radio.
I have some questions, and folks, if you have any others, then please type them into the chat box. I can see one from Alex. Thank you. We'll gloss over that one for now. A question from Chelsea. The report you showed, is that a default report in Marketo, or do I need to dig around and pay more for it?
No, it is a default. If you go to the analytics panel, it is one of the standard reports that you can create. You do need to ensure that you, in the setup, let me just, I'll share my screen now that, sorry, share, yes, that one, share, it's this one, yep. Correct? Yeah.
Back to you, yep.
Yeah, so in the setup tab of this report, I would have included these specific programs. And once I do that, you would then save as, and you can save it in your reports as a program performance report. And then you can refresh it on demand.
And a follow-up question for that is, if I don't have Salesforce and Dynamics, how hard is this stuff to measure?
Interestingly, this customer that I'm sharing now, her Salesforce does not report sales into Marketo. So there's no, this report that we're seeing today doesn't actually have any financial records behind it. Effectively, it's the same scenario as you. If you don't have Salesforce or Dynamics, you're going to get something quite similar to this, because you won't have any financial results sitting inside that report. So effectively, it'll look very similar for you as well.
Cool. Have you ever, not sure if we should answer this, have we ever had anybody, an RMS customer, I'm assuming they're talking about, sorry, Blueprint X-ANZ, ever been blacklisted?
We have. It wasn't during my time, but I do know of a large corporate who made a mistake in that they had actually really good intentions. They wanted to wash out all of the bad contacts in their database. So what they chose to do was they bulk emailed their entire database with effectively a "hello, are you still there" email, which is a great way of knowing whether that inbox is still valid. However, because of the sheer volume that was sent out, a number of email clients such as Yahoo or Google or Hotmail picked up on the surge, and they blacklisted the customer, which resulted in RMS or Blueprint X-ANZ contacting Marketo to try and resolve the issue quickly. We also aborted the send so that no more emails were sent out in that campaign. But yes, it has happened. It's not easy to get around, which is why in most cases, whenever you are set up in Marketo, there is a 10 or a 15,000 record count communication limit in any program. It's to stop this from accidentally happening.
That's a very kind way of you saying it. For those of you that do know me, you'll know that I used to be doing all this consultancy stuff. I'm slightly out of practice just at the moment, but we've actually had 2 clients doing that, and they were both mine at the time. So Mina, you were being very kind to me. Thank you. Not that I did them, but I was certainly in charge of the instance at that time. Somebody else has asked a question here. Who is that? That's Lily, saying, why do you say email is hated? You said it was both yin and yang. I think you may have gone on to answer it, but got anything more to say there?
Yeah, email is loved and hated. It's hated because it is, well, it's loved first off by businesses because it's low cost. It almost costs you nothing to send out. The cost behind it is probably the template costs that you may have purchased or developed at a HTML or a dev level. But it's also hated because it is heavily used for every man and his dog for every reason. So an operational communication goes out, it's an email. An offer communication goes out, it's an email. Our closing and opening times as a business, if we have branches, is an email. So it can, one of the stats that I didn't include in the statistics within email was the average user of emails receives 120 emails a day. Now, if you think about 120 emails a day, how much attention are you going to give to those emails? You're either going to mark them as, you're either going to unsubscribe from them, which is probably the quickest way to stop them from being received. And it's probably the most honest response that you can give as a customer back to the business. The worst one is when your emails deliver to the customer, and because they've not opened your emails for quite some time, Gmail, in its wonderful, Lord and Savior status, puts them to spam, and they don't ever actually see it. So it's delivered from your perspective, but they've never seen it. So it can be easily ignored. It can be easily deleted. Which is why it is despised, especially when it's abused.
Okay, nicely said. I think we'll go with one more question because I'm cognizant of time now. And this one is yet another one from Chelsea. Direct mail. Are people still doing that? Yes.
It's got a bit of a renaissance. Not I wouldn't say heavily used or even close to what it may have been used 20 or 30 years ago, but it does have a special place. And that special place is when you're dealing with an audience where let me say that definitely. If your product is showing capabilities at a print level or at a physical level, it's not a service, for example, it's actually a product. A lot of the times the prospectus that you send or the brochure that you send is far more effective at generating a lead or converting a lead than trying to send a PDF version of a brochure. That physical product that you've sent in the mail indicates a trustworthiness and a standby attitude that your business has with the product it's producing. But if you were to only send an email, we all know that an email can be superseded. We can say terms and conditions apply and make a whole bunch of terms and conditions. And we can always retract what an email might say by just sending another email behind it. But when we send a prospectus and we send a direct mail for a product, we're putting hand on heart and saying, we are so confident in this, we've put it on paper. And it probably comes from my advertising days, in that customers in the 2000s to 2020s, obviously a lot of advertising fell away from print and from magazines and went digitally. But the trust in a product that is printed on paper will always be higher than what's not printed or what's put digitally.
Be interesting to see what happens in these no-touch, contactless societies that we're just about to head into, to see if that changes. But it probably does help that a lot of our customers are, well, there's a big printer company who has access to some rather sexy printing equipment. Yes. And also some of them are real estate agents and selling physical, tangible things as well. So it's going to be an interesting time. I do have a bunch of other questions here, which I'm actually going to collate, I think, and then we'll send it back. But I think there was one question that came from Vanessa, who's feeling a bit bad that I think she's not doing this and I think we know why. She's feeling bad. How many customers are actually doing all this stuff really properly? And I think it's probably one of those things that maybe gets forgotten a little bit. Clearly not in your case with your clients, Mina. But it's certainly something that in these days of tidying up and you're sitting at home, maybe looking for things to do. That's certainly not the case in Elliot's case. He sounds incredibly busy. But as far as the sort of things you can do at this quieter time whilst you're stranded at home, these are the sort of things that it really would make sense to get right, so that when the bounce back does happen, you're not looking for those sort of reports. They'll just be there. So it's a great time to do some spring cleaning. I guess that's what I'm saying.
Definitely.
I'm gonna call this to a halt. We're a little bit over time, but everybody apart from one has actually stayed with us. So either everyone's gone and just gone to get a coffee, or it was so fabulous that they've stayed right until the end. But I wanted to say thank you to everybody who's attended today. That was fun. We'll record that. Well, we did record it. We'll put a copy of it up on the internet. But for now, a round of applause, albeit a quiet one, for Mina. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day, guys. And thank you again for taking time out of your days.
Cheerio.
Take care.